Hello and welcome everybody to MedTech Leading Voices MedTech Startup Masterclass CE certification versus FDA strategy with three expert panel speakers today, Ronald Baumans, Michelle Lott, and Nika MedDev. And of course, that doesn't advance the slide. So a couple housekeeping notes as we get started. One, first of all, I'd like you to try the chat function. Just drop in what country you're joining us from and say if you're a startup, just for the fun of it. You know, we like to know who's on the phone. There you go. Start using that chat function. I want you to use the chat and QA functions vigorously throughout this webinar. I want you to not be shy about asking questions. We'll try to get to all the questions. Those we can't get to, we'll follow up with. Please participate in the polls and surveys. Yes, a recording and slides will be sent via email tomorrow to all registrants. 766 people last time I checked, so that's a great thing. We are offering a certificate of attendance. It says you attended the 1-hour webinar. And if you would like that, please put your name as you would like it to appear on the certificate and your email address in the chat, and we happily send it to you, but please give us a couple days and don't nag me because we get them out as soon as we can, but it's a very manual process. Then make sure you're subscribed to MedTech Leading Voice, and if you need to contact me for any reason or don't feel comfortable using the chat, use my email address. You can see it right there. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Again, Sean, moderator. Quick round of introductions. I'm going to let them say more about themselves, but Ronald is a co-founder of R2C2, and it's a newly formed regulatory strategy group with Nika and Michelle Lott from leanRAQA. What's interesting about this collaboration to me is that these three experts are coming together from both sides of the pond to offer their particular strengths and insights into regulatory strategy, particularly for startups. So be sure to pay careful attention to what they say. And don't be afraid to reach out to any of them, because reaching out to any of them is reaching out to all of them. With that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to introduce Michelle to talk about the U.S. strategy.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. So in this masterclass, we're going to go through the CE certification process versus the FDA strategy. I'm going to speak a little bit to the FDA strategy, and then Ronald's going to hop in and talk about the kind of current state of the CE certification. And then we're going to keep both of our presentations rather brief and hope to spend most of the time answering your questions at the end. So let's get started. Sean gave you an overview of me. I have been in medical devices for over 20 years. I did serve a 4-year term as an industry representative on a FDA Good Manufacturing Practices Advisory Committee. Then I make a joke that I'm a master grief counselor because you're here, you probably already know the pain on both sides of the pond with the FDA and the MDR on the other side of the pond. This is my C-suite. They are currently asleep, but they might not stay that way. So I apologize for any extraneous noise. So let's get started.
We're not seeing your slides.
You can't?
No.
Yes, I can.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Weird.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, I see some thumbs up that we're good to go.
Great.
Okay.
Right.
So one of the first unique things about the US compared to the methodology that the MDR classifies, and the MDR uses like a rule-based approach, the FDA uses a risk-based approach that involves a level of different types of submissions based off of the risk structure of the product. So for super low risk devices, the pathway to market in the US might be a walk in the park, in that It could be at 510K exempt. It could also be GMP exempt. Then the next kind of risk class for like low and moderate risks is more like running a marathon. This is for class 2 products, and this is a 510K submission that's based off of a predicate or a substantial equivalence argument. If you have kind of maybe a medium risk product, but there doesn't exist a regulation or a product code, that's a little bit more like running a marathon. The FDA calls that de novo or of new. So for new and novel things that you don't anticipate being life-sustaining, life-supporting, you go through this de novo process, and then you are most likely classified into this lower risk class 2 510K product. Whereas those life-supporting and life-sustaining products, it's more like running an Ironman in terms of these are going to be pre-market approval. They're going to require standalone safety and efficacy data and a lot of animal and clinical trials as well. So this is another unique thing about the US market is the combination of different controls and exemptions available for each class of device. And it's unique because you may have some exemptions in the US. For example, class 1 products are usually exempt from design controls. However, not even self-certified products in the EU are exempt from design controls. So what this means is not only can the type of submission and the level of information involved vary compared to the EU, but also the content of your quality management system. So if we look at how in the EU these types of submissions compare, just the methodology of creating an argument for a successful 510K is based off of something called substantial equivalence, and it's a comparison to a predicate or an already legally marketed device that has an existing regulation and product code. Now, substantially equivalent doesn't mean it has to be identical. It just means that in terms of intended use and technology, it has to be similar enough that it's not raising new questions of safety and efficacy. But if you don't have enough similarities where you can make a substantially equivalent argument and you don't fall into an existing regulation, that means that you are new and novel, but you're moderate risk. So you go for this de novo process in hopes of classification into a class 2 510K for future products. Whereas again, that PMA, pre-market approval, has to have standalone scientific validity of safety and efficacy. In terms of length and kind of effort, you know, you're ranging 1,500 plus pages, 1,500 for maybe a simpler type of product for a 510K, whereas you're in the range of about 4,000 pages for a de novo, and PMAs are back when in the days we used to print these are the equivalent of 30 plus 3-inch ring binders. Another unique thing about the way the FDA processes submissions compared to the EU notified bodies is that the FDA has clock days that and metrics that they're measured internally on. So for a 510K, those clock days are 90 days. However, roughly the average 510K takes about 200 days once you go through your additional information request and responses with the agency. Whereas de novos and PMAs, the clocks are 180 days for de novo, average of 400 days. PMAs, the average is about 800 days. For pre-market approval, generally 510Ks and de novos don't have to have an inspection before you can market your products. PMAs require a pre-approval inspection. And again, compare and contrast, anything besides the self-certified products in the EU are going to require the notified body for both your quality management system and your submission technical file content. The user fees is another area where it varies greatly from the EU. These are fixed for the type of submission that you have to do. And if you qualify as a small business, which means you're less than $100 million in revenue a year, you also qualify for a discount on these fees. And it's important to note the terminology that goes with each. So for a 510K, you can say you have market clearance. De novo market clearance are granted. And only can you say FDA approval if you've gone through the PMA process. So some advantages of going to the US market first compared to the EU market. So in the US, the FDA is the only agency involved in reviewing and approving or clearing products. So there overall is more consistency than the notified bodies. We're up to, I believe, over 40, nearly 50 notified bodies now. These are independent for-profit organizations that are designated by different government bodies, but they are not government bodies in and of themselves. And each one of them has different interpretations. Also, once they provide a CE mark for your product, they become the defenders and responsible for your technical documentation in front of the national competent authorities or the equivalent of their in-country FDAs. So the problem here is that each country in the European Union could have one, if not more, competent authorities that these notified bodies must interface with. So you can see how the number of both agencies that are giving the approval for your product and the number of government agencies that they have to answer to kind of grows exponentially from the number and type of interactions that you could expect with the FDA. So what's happened recently with the MDR is that we've seen a shift in go-to-market strategy, especially for startups that may have new or novel products. It used to be that the US had a reputation for requiring strenuous clinical studies, and the EU had a reputation of ease of entry. But with the advent of the MDR, these paradigms have totally shifted the time and cost that it takes to enter each. So if we look at those shifts in communication and budget, we see that the FDA offers many types of free interactions pre-FDA submission. These are great ways of getting FDA's input and feedback on your technology. They even have special programs to facilitate faster access and more collaboration with the agency. And then they have also low fee programs for you to get written confirmation of your classification and regulation. During the review with the FDA submission, depending on your types, the fees here are fixed, and you are not going to come up at the end of a submission review with an unexpected cost in terms of the actual agency fee. Whereas if we look at from the notified body review, there really is no such thing as a free pre-review or interaction to find out where your notified body may stand on your particular technology or testing theories. Just the application form and the process of getting a quote itself is extremely tedious, as that the notified bodies are still running at very limited capacity. And just the application process alone, I've heard from different notified bodies, can take 6 to 9 months. The fees here are not fixed. You can go up to, they try to cap it at 3 rounds. I know a client that pulled out of a EU CE mark assessment early in the MDR process because they had hit over $100,000 in notified body fees alone, and they didn't feel like there was any end in sight. So you just have to know that going in, that there's not going to be a fixed time or a goal time or cost. FDA also has the small business designation that can save you 50 to 75%, depending on the type of submission that you're going for. In terms of that difference that I discussed about the pre-submission, this is a really powerful tool to be able to ask FDA specific questions related to your regulatory process and your technology. It gives you a snapshot of FDA's current thinking on their product. And current thinking could mean other things that are under review but might not be cleared yet, so you don't have visibility to things in the pipeline that might be coming. It could be maybe guidance documents that are in draft or being discussed internally in FDA that you also might not have visibility to. That FDA will tell you more than is publicly available about your product. These are especially important if you have anything that is first of its kind or novel. And best of all, again, they are free. Other types of pre-submissions that are advantageous are the Breakthrough and the Safer Technologies program with the FDA. These are different types of pre-submissions where you make a case where in the Breakthrough, your product is more effective than a more effective treatment of specifically life-threatening or irreversibly debilitating diseases. Whereas in the STEP program, you make a case that your devices are just reasonably expected to significantly improve the safety and availability of treatments. But these conditions are less serious than those that are eligible for the Breakthrough. But both provide you with an expedited access pathway, a more informal way to engage with the agency in terms of different types of discussions. And the goal is that the FDA becomes your collaborator and partner in bringing these important technologies to market. Another advantage, now this one's a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's an advantage because it takes a lot of the guesswork out of assembling a submission for the agency. It has a ton of help text that help you identify the types of information that FDA is expecting. It links you to other FDA guidance documents. It has a completeness verification. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out of not only the preparation process, but things that you're going to be asked during the review process. It also interfaces directly with the internal templates that the FDA uses to evaluate the submission. So what are your secrets to success for the US aid market? Well, first off, monitor those FDA guidance documents and updates and press releases it publishes so that you know ahead of time what their current thinking could be. Become compliant with the quality management system regulations, the QMSR. As soon as possible. The clock is ticking. We have about 1.5 years left before you need to transition your quality management system. Ensure that you've selected the right regulatory pathway via the pre-submission confirmation via the pre-submission process with the FDA. And then make sure that you're using those pre-submissions to understand the FDA's position and to leverage the Breakthrough and the STEP as much as possible to benefit from that expedited pathway. So there are a lot of resources to help you navigate all of this on my website, and then let me know how I can be helpful.
Thank you, Michelle. I just posted a link to everybody to a pre-sub cheat sheet, which gives the estimated time lengths for each one of those different pathways. So make sure you check that out. And I'll also put up the QMSR cheat sheet as well, because I think that those are both useful. There were a number of questions about how long these pathways take. Can you give us an estimation, like how much the submission for a high class device might cost for the FDA certification? That kind of thing. So we'll get to those in the questions and answer section, but I encourage everybody to use the Q&A. This is easier to keep track of the questions there, but you know, if you've already submitted a question the other way, that's fine. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Ronald at this point for his presentation on C certification in the EU.
Yes, Sean, thank you. And thank you, Michelle. That was a very good presentation. I'm going to share my slides now. And so they should be there now. Right. Okay. So I'm going to talk about startup and the importance of an efficient regulatory and clinical strategy. And I think you need to understand that you need to have a good understanding of both strategies and what they can do for a startup. But first, something about myself. I've worked with medical devices since 1987. And I've been in many different jobs. Two are have been very important for my career. I've worked 11 years as a senior inspector for the Dutch Food and Authority, where I was responsible for the southern half of the Netherlands regarding manufacturing, authorized representation, import, distribution, and use of medical devices, so the whole chain. And after 11 years, I want to do something else, and I started working for Emergo, later Emergo by UL, which is a global consulting organization. You may have heard about them, and there I have done lots of about 200 projects for companies all over the world with all sorts of interesting products and challenges. Since 2022, I have my own strategic consulting organization, and I provide PRC services. And last year, I was one of the co-founders of AR2C2. I have a motto: good pilot can land a plane in a storm, an absent pilot knows how to fly around bad weather. So if you see me frown, see that as a warning. So if I start working with a startup, one of my first questions is always, what is your exit strategy? Because no startup remains a startup forever. And there are different ways of ending that status. One is autonomous growth. I mean, Facebook, Google, they did that, right? They started somewhere in a garage and grew, and Apple and what have you, or acquisition, and that happens much more often. And the third version, ending the attempt, of course, that's not why you started, but it also happens. Now, you need to understand. So let's focus on the top two of them. So if we talk about autonomous growth, that takes a lot of time and investment, and that means that you need to justify that long way around. Okay, acquisition, that usually creates a faster return on investment, but you need to do something there. And if you want to sell in an acquisition, you need to show value. So what's the value of a startup? Well, it's the assets and a promise. Now, the assets of the most startups, that's a fast dwindling bank account and some very cheap laptops usually. That's it. And but the promise, that's interesting. The promise is something that's going to happen in the future, and that's where investors will pay money for. So what's the value of your startup? How do you do that? How do you measure that? So you have a promise, and the promise is the commercial potential of your product multiplied by market access. No market, it doesn't matter how commercial and interesting it is. If you don't have market access, it's zero, and vice versa. I mean, beautiful market access, but no commercial potential, still, promise is not there. So how do you demonstrate your commercial potential? You need to sell your product. Basically, that's it. Sell your product for real. Patients, have physicians involved, and in a competitive market. So against other alternatives, you need to do that. Now, if you do that, if you want to show commercial potential, if you do it in the US, we do it there, and you do a pretty good job, you manage to get maybe 0.1% of the market. Well, will that be noticed? It's a bloody good result because the US market is big. But if you go to a very small market in let's say Europe, like Ireland, Denmark, the Netherlands, and you have a 5% market share, in terms of turnover, it's nothing, but it shows that you can push out other products, you can push out competitors. So demonstrating commercial potential is not about cents, it's about percents, right? And that's what you need to aim for. So market access is the other component, and that's the ability to demonstrate to authorities the device is sufficiently safe and effective. Otherwise, they will not allow you to expose their citizens to your product. So they each have their own, all these markets have their own specific level of scrutiny. And in Europe, MDR, IVDR, they're currently the toughest, considered to be the toughest in the world. So while FDA is, well, easier, slightly easier, well, not always, not everywhere, but there are some ways to get it easier done in the US. If you look at notified body certification, notified bodies, they audit quality management system, they review technical documentation, and if they get it wrong, they face serious claims or even prosecution. We've seen this with the PIP breast implant case. The notified body that was involved in it is still struggling with court cases. And it means that notified bodies will be tough to pass. They just don't want to have another problem there. So yeah, they will be tough to pass. But that means if you go to Europe, if you make it there, you can make it anywhere, right? And to abuse another famous quote, you go to Europe not because it's easy, but because it's difficult. And that's something that I want to give you. That if you do that, you can achieve a lot value, add a lot value to the promise of your startup. So if you talk about regulatory strategy, you need to make sure that you understand what is your product. Is it a medical device or something else? Is it an IVD? Whatever, right? Then, if it is a medical device, what is it? Is it just a single device or a multi-component device? Is it a system, a combination of devices, or what? And how are you going to manage the certification? I've seen companies getting into all sorts of problems because they got it wrong. Although it is a crucial step you need to do very, very early in your process. But it's a software involved, right? Now, if you say, well, that's not important for people to make a drug. Well, the drug will be administered, right? So think about the devices involved, and not only from a regulatory perspective, but also commercial. There can be some commercially interesting aspects to that. Now, and only then you can start thinking about the route to compliance. You can start developing that. So there's a lot you need to do very early on in that process. And I think you need to do that well before your design freeze, because after the design freeze, it's very difficult to change characteristics of your device if you think, oh, it would be more efficient to do it slightly different. So start early on and make sure that you have a bloody good regulatory strategy discussion. Now, your clinical strategy. That's about demonstration of safety and clinical performance. Of course, it's part of your regulatory strategy. And for innovative devices in general, clinical investigations are necessary. And if you are going to do a clinical investigation, what are you going to demonstrate? It's non-inferiority or superiority. Both have their pros and cons. Non-inferiority, it's usually easier, faster, and it allows a product to stay what I call under the radar. You're not exposing, you're not showing all the benefits of your device. It's just you're just one of the other products. Superiority, well, you can push existing technology into the market. Earlier today, I had a call with a company, and they have something that could be very disruptive, and we had to warn them, please make sure you stay under the radar until you're strong enough to have to be to survive some beating up by those larger corporations that you might be a threat to. And that's something to keep in mind. So all there is a strategy. Now, you can combine that, your clinical strategy and your commercial potential, because clinicians will be involved in investigation, and the hospitals involved can be potential customers. And the clinicians involved may turn into ambassadors of your technology. So carefully select those. And if you want to start selling in, let's say, Denmark, don't do your study in Italy, right? Do it in Denmark. So you have to think all that whole um, process. So what's your commercial potential? Well, physicians, prospect patient, your reimbursement strategy. Let's set all of that is very important to build your commercial potential. And it means that you need to have a study that addresses all these aspects. So if you want to do it efficiently, make sure your study design covers everything there. Now, market access. If you're not based in the EU and you want to go to the EU, you need an authorized representative, you need an importer, you need a legal representative if you want to do a clinical investigation. And well, ARC2C2 can help with all those things, but there are also other companies that provide similar services. Don't worry about that. Also very important, your perfect patients. That's something you need to understand. So if you have your product, it is allowed on the market. Just don't throw your device at physicians and hope for the best. They will probably expose it to their most desperate patients, because that's where they start with. Instead, you should specify for that first generation of users a sharp profile of that patient, where they will be successful. And once they see that the product is successful, the device works, and it does what they expect, or even better, they will use it on other patients, and they will see, and maybe even those desperate patients, and they know they are desperate patients, and they know that they may not be successful. So your perfect patient, that's also something you can address in the study, and you can test and refine that definition there. So what do you need to do for the MDR? You need to have a quality management system. You need to have your Annex 1, general safety performance requirements. That's a huge checklist. There are 23 requirements, but actually, if you split them up in all the different levels, there are 197. Annexes 2 and 3, they provide guidance on how to build up the technical documentation. There's your structure for that. And then you must do all kinds of other things like your risk management, clinical evaluation, biocompatibility evaluation, usability, and what have you. PMS, PMCF, you need all that. Of course, you can do it yourself. You can outsource everything or go hybrid. And what I mean with that is that you do most of the work, but you have experts guiding you. And that's something I would recommend, because then you can learn the most of it. And it's a very efficient way of quickly doing this. So in summary, as a startup, you must have an exit strategy. You must know who you want to sell to. You must understand what they want to see as proof of concept, and who you want to sell to, who you want to sell your company to, right? You must understand what they want to see as proof of concept. Define how you want to do your initial certification. Understand how you become certified. Have a clinical strategy that supports those objectives. Convince your investors that this will all be worth waiting and paying for. And well, if that involves the EU, we can help with that. So having said that, thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
So the questions are rolling in, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Nika, who is going to give a short presentation before rolling into the panel discussion. So please continue to submit your questions with the Q&A function. Panelists, I've sent you a summary of the questions that were in the Q&A because I can't access the I mean in the chat. So there are five or six questions there, as well as questions in the QA. So with that, Nika, thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Can you see my slides? Does it look? Can you see it? Looks okay? Okay.
Yes.
So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon, morning, depends where you located. It was, by the way, not easy to find a time slot that suits us and our partners across the ocean, but that's all about partnership. So I want to think about, I have rather interesting question. Do we really have to choose? So we were presented with the FDA advantages. We talked about CE certification, but I want to talk to you a few minutes about choices we have to make. So first of all, a few words about myself. I'm a biomedical engineer. I'm for about more than 2 years, I'm in the regulatory and quality management field in the different roles. But my main, this is all for fun. My main job starts afternoon with a lot of kids, cats, and dogs. So yeah, I wanted to mention this globalization trend that kind of really we are feeling for last years, and it comes into the, first of all, the both regulation system have the fundamental goal, the same goal to ensure that the devices that reach the market, they are safe and efficient. And why don't they work together, one might wonder? Why don't we have a global system? I guess we will. I guess in 5 years from now, we will have a global system. Hopefully everything will be digitalized and everything will work just in a click of the button. But for now, we still struggle. We know how much struggle it is for quality regulatory professionals, as probably many of our listeners now. This whole globalization started more than 10 years ago, I guess, with MDSAP medical device single audit program that just brought together requirements from different countries. That was the first participants was United States, Canada, Brazil, Australia, and Japan. Basically, you just go for one audit procedure for your quality management system, and it will be accepted by all those countries. Right now, more countries are willing to participate. More countries are participating more countries are participating as observers at this moment. And yeah, this is very promising procedure, to my opinion. Then we all know about QMSR FDA rule that will be effective, as Michelle mentioned, in February 26th. That is very closely aligned. It is based basically on ISO 1345 2016. So the quality management requirements are already overlapping on both sides of the ocean. So these are already good news. More news to globalization. I think what one can also mention, or one should keep in the mind, that the European legislation. So meaning if you are compliant, if your product is compliant with European MDR or IVDR, the regulations in Europe, you have an easy access to other markets, a lot of Asian markets, but also Canada, South Africa, Brazil, they will simplify the registration procedure. And this also the very well represented proof of the usefulness of the European certification. So it's not only also open your ways to other markets as well. But I have even better news for you. You don't really have to decide, because as this sense of this masterclass is to bring both the companies on the same table, and we're truly happy to close this partnership, this cooperation between our two companies. And that means that doesn't matter who you address, we will help you to find the right way. And every company has its own way, and depending on devices, depending on legislation, depending on your goals, depending on your investors and so on, then maybe one or the other way would be right for you. And the good news, you can come to either of us, and we will guide you and support you for the whole way. So if you need a FDA, we will gently hand you over to the trustful hands of Michelle, and the other way around. If you need support in the European area, with authorized representative, with clinical strategy, regulatory strategy, getting in touch with notified body, choosing the right notified body. It is very true that some notified body have waiting lines, but not all of them. There are some notified body that have very short waiting times, and they're eager to work with smaller companies, with startups. So we can help you to get in touch with those. And yeah, so we can help you to get your innovation into the market. I have one more slide about our company. We're really new on the market, and we get a lot of questions about our name. So you have the little cute guy from Star Wars, R2-D2, and this was kind of inspiration for us to choose our name, R2C2, Authorized Representative and Clinical Strategy 2.0. We do claim to create a new strategy and new thinking about this important tasks, because we address this task as a whole. We not only give you a stamp to be your trust representative. Okay, we check that you have documentation, you have certificate of conformance. Okay, we'll approve you in UDAMED and you're a client. No, we try our best to provide the whole service, to support you also with market access, to help you to develop optimal regulatory and clinical strategy that will help your company to get in the market. So it's a bit unorthodox, I'm aware. So we're still finding our way in the market, and we'll be really glad to get in touch with you if you have some questions or need some also some short consulting. I just also want to take this opportunity to present our two other partners. So you can see myself and Ronald. We have also Leo and Zev. They are carry more responsibility for business development and market access. And together, I think we are very unique team. And yeah, we'll be happy to answer your questions. And we're happy you can also approach us offline. And yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. And I guess these are our contact details. And I think we are ready for next step, Sean. Thank you.
So let's go ahead and move to the QA. Just to get things started, I wanted to ask a provocatory question to Ronald about predicates and equivalence, in the discussion that we were having offline about that. If he could speak to that while we're finishing the third poll question. I apologize, I forgot to launch the poll questions. So we're going to share results for them. There are 3 poll questions. There's one more coming. it was about half and half for the US versus the EU. And you'd see the stages of Ronald. Are you with us?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I can. Well, equivalence. That's about a product, a device which is similar in clinical intended purpose, risk class, and essential design and manufacturing characteristics. And that means it must be the same thing. And it's a very narrow definition. So you cannot use equivalence like you have two implants and they're used in different parts of the body, but they are for the rest are quite similar. No, they're not. They don't have the same intended purpose, so they cannot be compared. Predicate. I've seen predicate devices where I thought, okay, yeah, that's more or less looks a bit the same with some using my free spirit. I can see some similarities, but and yeah, it's a different way of thinking. So at the moment you go to Europe, and I recommend all documents to do a very careful search function for the word predicate and remove it, because at the moment a notified body reviewer sees that, they get an allergic reaction, which is quite fatal, not to them, but for your technical documentation. I saw a question pass that may have something a feel to that. If you have let's say access to the US market, like a 510K, does it help for MDR? To some level, because you may have done a lot of work already. You may have a lot of underlying reports and test reports, those things. But with regulations, what I use as a rule is that if regulations are not 100% the same, please consider them 100% different. Avoid copying and pasting unless you're absolutely certain you can do that. Basically, if there's a difference, you need to set up the whole technical documentation from the start. Sorry for that, but that's yeah, that's how it works. Because otherwise, you may have the little errors, little things that slip in that you overlook, but the notified body reviewer will not overlook that. Any other questions?
Yeah, so then it says, hi, Ronald, could you take on the pros and cons of conformity assessment via Annex 9 versus Annex 11 for a Class 2A device? Ooh.
Yeah,
Stop.
well, I'll give you the short answer. Annex 9 is about your quality management system. So it looks at the quality management system and it singles and it selects a few of your devices as a test. If your quality management system is such that it results in good quality products, of which the conformity assessment documentation is correct. But that's Annex 9. If you have only one product, like a startup, then the sampling is very simple. Then it's just that one product, and you're not benefiting from the main thing in Annex 9. Annex 10 is about product verification, and that very often works very well if you have huge installations and you're only selling one or two products, right? Then you're looking at those single products, and that helps. It's a completely different process. If you are working as a startup and you want to sell your company, there must be some growth in it. I strongly recommend go for Annex 9 because that allows for a lot of growth in your product. Annex 10 it's really an odd one out. I think less than 1% of the product will have Annex 11. or Annex 10. It's a very rare thing, and especially Class 2A, go for Annex 9. You're making your life a lot easier, and you're creating a future for your company and your devices.
There are a lot of questions here. Well, one of them that was answered in our Path to Market Summit more extensively, and I'll include the link to that, is what about UK legislation?
Okay. Yeah, and then I think Michelle has got a question. Come on. No, the UK, that's in the UK you have UK CE marking, and they want to promote that. However, with other products, the British government has said, well, okay, we're not going to make it mandatory. If you want to apply UK CE marking, that's fine, but we also accept CE marking. Valid CE marking, that is. For medical devices, they keep it the same. And for now, they are opening up their market for UKCA, of course. Yeah, you can go there to do that. But you can also use CE, and they also want to have open the door for FDA approved products and 510K and what have you. That last step, they're still thinking about it because it has a lot of consequences if you have different devices. I mean, there's no FDA stamp on the product. So you have products without a stamp in the UK. So what does it mean? They can come from anywhere. They may even be CE mark devices without CE on it. So they have a little problem there if they want to accept US products. But so from that perspective, the UK is still not still working on developing this and developing the full understanding. For now, I think just focus on CE if you want to go to Europe. Forget about UKCA. That's not going to fly for the US for the UK because they don't have the notified body or the UK body capacity to do it, and it will add costs, and so the patient will have to pay for it. And for now, nobody is preparing for it, and we have seen what happens in the EU, where companies and notified bodies try to prepare as good as possible, and they still have this huge gap in capacity that is causing a lot of problems in implementing MDR, IVDR. So I don't see this happen in the UK. However ambitious they are, but no, reality is putting them. And with the current government, I think there's a slightly more realistic people there, less unicorns and more realism. So let's hope for that.
Two questions from the same user for Michelle. One is going to be fairly easy to answer. We plan to submit our US FDA application by March 2024. I'm not sure if they mean 2025 or 2024. Do we need to consider QMSR?
Well, in the US, this is another distinction between the US and Europe. When you put your product application in, there is no expectation that you have a full quality management system until you go into commercialization. And very technically, if you go in 2025 and you get cleared in 2025 and you commercialize in 2025, you need to be compliant very technically with the QSR. But then right on the heels of that, you're going to have to be compliant with the QMSR in February of 2026. You know, and then given that the average 510K review time is 200 days, I feel like it would behoove you to go into compliance with QMSR because you're not out of compliance with QSR by being in compliance with QMSR, but you are out of compliance with QMSR if you're only compliant with QSR. So it will take you less time and less rework in your quality management system to just move towards the QMSR.
Thank you. And the same user asks, usability studies, are studies done in Europe acceptable to the US FDA? And I'm going to flip that question to Ronald in the reverse, which is studies done in the US acceptable in Europe?
So I will tell you this, if you are planning on doing any type of study, be it usability or clinical or animal, I would get the buy-in from the FDA. Well, even if you're going to do it in the US, all those studies are so particular and so expensive that you need to put those protocols through the FDA in a pre-submission, get their feedback, get their buy-in. For some studies, they will let you use a certain portion of them, OUS, but they will require a validation from a US population. And this could be because there could be socioeconomic differences, ethnicity differences, language differences. That's the big one. Usability is a good bit to do with instructions for use. And your instructions for use, they want to see that you have a native English-speaking population that you have tested the product on. So those are some considerations from using those in the US.
Interesting. Question for Nika.
Does Ronald have a vice versa?
Right. Yeah, Ronald, tell us about Europe accepting clinical data from the US.
Yeah, well, usability data and clinical data. Of course, if you have a non-European population, you need to justify that you can extrapolate those data for Europe. And that can be done. You can do all kinds of studies anywhere in the world, as long as you can justify extrapolation for the European population. Having said that, you must meet certain standards. So for usability studies, you have the 62366 ISO 62366 standard for usability studies, and for clinical investigations ISO 14155 about study ethics. Those are just essentials that you need to comply with. If you don't have that, you have a problem, and so that's something to keep in mind. At the moment you start doing usability studies or clinical studies, you will probably get some experts involved. Just ask them if there are any issues if you want to use them in Europe, the data, and that they keep that in mind, and or vice versa. So at the moment you do that, be very efficient and just say, yeah, we want it for both markets. That's what I would recommend. And if they're good experts, they know exactly what they should be doing then.
Fantastic. Moving to Nika, this question, in the past, Saudi FDA accepted US FDA to facilitate faster market access. In Nika's presentation, we can see that EU MDR has a similar effect for the Saudi market. Is that the same for IVDR devices? I'm going to venture to guess yes, but I'm going to let you.
I think it's really hard to be very detailed without knowing the specific cases. I think they do have gradation based on the risk class, but it's definitely the same. The same MDR and IVDR are considered the same level of legislation, so that's opens the door in the same way.
Thank you very much. Question for any or all of you. How realistic is changing the notified body in the middle of the MDR certification due to extremely slow and disappointing process? Is it worth considering?
Yeah, if I'm already there, I just want my thoughts on that. It's a lot of communication issues where people communicating with people. So I would suggest really we can gladly look together into this. I encourage this person to get in touch with us personally. I would love to speak about it. It's very often the case that auditors are expecting something that they don't communicate maybe very well, or the clients don't understand, the manufacturer don't really understand what they want from them, and then they don't provide it, and so it's goes too slow, but it can be definitely currently, as Michelle also mentioned, some notified body are overloaded. So technically it's possible. We need to see into this. Important is that there are no unclosed issues, no CAPAs, no open audit findings that can prevent it. That might be tricky, but technically, if you will clean and then just want to switch your notified body for the next cycle, this is very manageable. But you need to see each case, what exactly happened there. Is there something we can fix? Is there something that they just didn't receive the answer they were looking for? Because we had cases like this. Yeah.
They have to report it if you're going to withdraw from an active review with a notified body. That notified body has to report it to the competent authority that you withdrew that application. Then you have to explain to the next notified body why you withdrew, and it can't just be because I didn't like where it was going. I didn't like the information request I was getting. And so then you could make a bigger mess for yourself, right?
Sounds ugly.
You have to be
that's
careful before you take
it's all about
decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about communication. I like to be in the process of selecting the notified body, because then I can really guide a company through it, and that usually helps to smooth out a lot of things. But I've been called in with processes that got stuck, and it sometimes comes down to what Nika said. Somewhere there is a problem in the communication, and people get dug into what they think is right, and yeah, that takes a bit of time. But in general, notified bodies don't like it if someone starts complaining. And so if you can put the exact right amount of pressure and exactly the right people, you can also make them move. But that's a very delicate process. And I would say don't try it at home.
But again, it's doable. You might need another extra audit in your cycle, but it's still doable. But first, try to resolve communication issues, and maybe you just don't understand what they want from you, or they don't understand what you expect from them. So this communication is really critical, and we're happy to support.
Fantastic. So there are a lot more questions. We're going to have to follow up individually in show. I want to thank everybody for their time. I want to thank the speakers, especially today, for coming and sharing their knowledge and expertise on these subjects. And I encourage everybody to complete the survey and to reach out to the speakers directly to let them know what you think, because you know what, it's a lot of fun to do these things, but sometimes it's like talking into, you know, an empty box. So don't be shy about sharing your feedback with the speakers.
Yes.
Connect with them on LinkedIn, do what you need to do. You people know how to do this. I want to thank you again, and I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean, for hosting us. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.